What's going on, BTS fans? We're here for another wonderful episode uncovering some great topics this weekend, and hope you are all doing well this week because we have a lot to talk about. And these are going to be some topics that we really love, and I think Josh also is going to love the first talk that we're going to have, this first segment that we're going to have.
Absolutely.
Josh, on that note, how we doing, man?
Everything's good, man. We got to celebrate the little girl's birthday. Uncle Harry's gonna be doing a little fiesta of his own. But I'm just happy that everything's all good and that we got some good hockey, got some good basketball going, and yeah.
Happy birthday, little Savvy. And on that note, we can get right into things. We got some hockey to start off with. Four nations. I know that last week on our little questionnaire that we did, you brought up the four nations, and I said, is that a hockey thing? Quickly after that, I Googled it, and I realized, yes, it was a hockey thing. And it is a battle of the four nations that was picked to represent in this tournament United States, Canada, Sweden, and the fourth team is, Josh, remind everybody who the fourth team is.
Finland.
Finland, right? Finland. So you have those four teams facing off to, I guess, host a trophy to say we are the best country. It's interesting. It's the first time that they're doing this, and
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's got some pretty good reception from the fans, from the players. They seem like they're really taking this seriously, which is a nice thing to see versus some
yeah,
of
for
these
sure.
other events that we have in other sports. These players, they're really going at it. They really want to win. They want to, I guess, have that nationalistic pride, which is a nice thing. And speaking of which, the week has gone by now since it's began, and the United States and Canada are going to face off in the championship. That's going to end up happening Thursday, February
Mhm.
20th at 8 p.m. And that's going to be a fun one to watch. I can't wait to get in there because I'm not really a hockey guy. I think everybody knows that. I do like hockey, but it's not my number one thing. That is definitely something I will be watching, and I will
Yeah.
hope the United States kicks some Canadian butt. What are your thoughts on this whole four nations thing?
Yeah, well, I saw a funny meme that they said they showed a picture of the All Stars and they said, "Is anyone going to start trying in 2024?" And then 2025, they said, "Is anyone going to make it out of the Four Nations tournament alive?" Like you could see the intensity and the energy in these players, um, representing their country, and that's always how it is. And no disrespect to Finland, but I think that if the landscape of the world was a little different right now, I think that that fourth nation would really be Russia because of the amount of players that they have and the quality of those players, especially Ovechkin at the tail end of his career. I think it would have been cool to see him represent his nation. But anyway, I think it's really cool. I think the USA has looked very strong defensively and they've scored goals when they've needed to, except in that last game. They were held scoreless for two periods. Canada looks legit. Every team played well, didn't embarrass themselves, showed they belonged. I don't know if the four is a set number, but I know there are a couple more. There are players from a couple more nations that I'm sure they're itching, trying to figure out a way to get into this next year. And Harry, something that you might find to show the public interest of this, the right now the tickets for the final are starting at $763.
Wow, that is a nice, pretty penny. And they're playing at the TD Garden in
Yeah,
Boston as well. So great
yeah.
venue to have such a great event. And you were kind of getting into the expansion potentially. So I mean, I was going to ask. It seems like a ridiculous question at this point because there was so much success. Is this something that's going to stick around? It seems like it should happen again in 2025 and 2026 and 2027. When we're talking about the expansion, though, where do we see like most of these other players in the NHL from these other countries that we could expect? Maybe another two teams join next year. I mean, you said something about Russia, obviously in the landscape of where the world is, and obviously them being held out because of that. And Finland comes in here. You think Russia should be or will be, or if not Russia, what are the other two countries? It seems like it would make sense for them to add at least two at a time, or two,
Yeah.
in I guess groups of two, so two or four, whatever it is. Let's start off with just two teams. What would those two other teams you think
Mm.
be that would also join this four nations and make it six nations?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I definitely think that Russia would be in there. And as I was starting to think about it, I got distracted because does your jersey have sleeves?
Uh,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, these are like the old school majestic jerseys. They're like not like the. It's got like a Bronx Bomber patch on here. It's something crazy. I think I got it at TJ Maxx for like 20 bucks. Brett Gardner jersey. I thought
No,
it was
that's
sick.
that's clean. I like it. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. That just threw me off.
No,
But
that's good. That's good. But so we got Russia as one country you think would, I guess, in a scenario
yeah,
that the NHL would be open to adding Russia as a team. So let's say they are. What would be the other team?
yeah. So besides that, I mean, you look at some combination because I feel like there are a bunch of players that you could combine from other nations with like you can have it be like the rest of Europe, but there's some Czech players like Pasternak. I just don't know if they'd have enough to have a whole team. So I think that's why it was tough. It would be tough to make it around any other than those five. But it's also hard to make a tournament with five teams, so it's really tough. But I got to do a little research into where some of these other players are from because for me, Finland, Sweden, Russia, Canada, America are the big five to me, and there's definitely more that I know Czech Republic. There's some, but I don't know if they could field a team that could compete with these teams in the best of the best style tournament. But there's got to be a way to make the rest of Europe be able to be represented without having to say the rest of Europe because I feel like they would want to have some sort of pride.
So this is obviously an NHL group, right? Instead of it being more of other countries pulling some of their players, because I think you probably have a group of players that could come out of, like, let's say Norway, for instance. There's probably a few in the NHL that are from Norway, and then if you decided, let's say, make it more of a global aspect, similar to like the FIFA World or the NHL World Cup, which they do have. I know they didn't have it in 2020 and 2024. Talking about bringing it back in 2028, which I think would be a lovely thing to do in this sport. Competition is a wonderful thing, and hockey is one of those sports that are super competitive. So we want to see that nationalistic level of competition. But going back to this, in terms of the expansion, this is more of like a bragging rights thing. Obviously, what we saw this year, the players aren't getting any incentives, at least from what I saw. It's not a monetary incentive. This is just a
Yeah,
representation, but you also have to be an NHL player. So if you're, maybe open to the idea of making this not only just an NHL thing and making it more of a global thing where, okay, we could add now Norway into the mix of things. And this could be a scenario if you didn't want to bring Russia in
mhm,
because of the whole scheme of the political world. And
yeah,
then say, okay, bring in some of your better Norway players from, your Norway leagues, and let's make this six teams. And if they can get another team, who knows, maybe from Czech Republic, and say, all right, well, we got Pasternak, and let's
yeah.
build around that, and try to make it more of an overall global thing, which would make it interesting. Now, I don't know how that would work, considering would that be way too similar of a thing as like the World Cup of for the NHL, or I don't want to call it the NHL World Cup, the
No, I know
Hockey
what you're
World
saying.
Cup. Well, we got to clarify because I don't want our viewers to think, what is this guy talking about? NHL World Cup? That doesn't make any
But you want to be
sense.
called crazy.
This is true, so call me crazy, but I did correct myself, so I don't know if you could call me crazy on this. You can call me crazy on anything you want. I just wanted to make the point that I clarified where I had a discrepancy. And so we
No,
move
for
on.
sure.
Um,
And
I think it's going to be
just do I want to say one thing. I just owe an apology to my Swiss King that's on my shirt from Switzerland. Nico and Timo and Siegenthaler are all in the Devils, and they're all Swiss. And
so there
but
you
I
go.
looked
You
it
got
up, and
another
there are
country
only
right there.
but there's only 11 players total and 28 total of the Czech Republic versus the US having 270 and Canada having 394. So
In terms of
definitely
the amount
some
of players that are representing their
yeah,
countries. Got it. So you're
yeah,
talking about 11, and I think you have 22 on the roster, correct?
yeah.
So that's half your
Maybe
roster right
a
there.
couple taxi squad, but like there's no way that you could say the 28 guys on the Czech Republic, the bottom 7 are close to the bottom 7 of Canada.
Well, I think ultimately what needs to happen is there needs to be more of an incentive, right? A reason to play,
Yeah.
other than just say we are the best country and just hold up this trophy, right? I think there needs to be some sort of, you know, the NBA kind of did something in their own right when they brought in the in-season tournament. It's a different thing. Obviously, this isn't a battle of countries or anything like that. And I think what happens with these things, it's kind of like the first couple of years of these things are like trial runs almost, and they're going to figure out how they can make them better. The NHL is the best at figuring things out sooner than later. I feel like they're less of a disaster compared to some of these other leagues like the NFL and the NBA and MLB, and which is something I can respect a lot about hockey is that they run a tighter ship and they know what they're doing over there. And so it could be something that next year they'll have a new revamped version of this Four Nations, whether or not they add two countries or make this a completely different thing, or not a completely different thing, but they add levels to it that make it even more interesting to be able to watch. And so on that note, I mean, this was a great thing. The only thing that I could say that is just a con of it, it's like a bragging rights thing, and I would rather have it be more
Yeah,
of an
for sure.
incentivized thing, whether that's paying these guys or doing something a little bit different about it. I mean, I think they should all be getting paid a little bit, whether it's $50,000 to play for your team. That's still something. They should be getting paid to play. I mean, we see injuries happen, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. And
Yeah,
so this could cost some of these franchises some of their key players. So there's got to be something else going on over here. If you're going to be a player and going to play, it's not like Sweden is calling you or Canada is calling you and saying, "Hey, come play for us." This is the league saying, "Oh, you're Canadian or you're Sweden or you're Swedish or you're from Finland. You represent your country. We're making this tournament. It's great. But Finland and Canada and Sweden, they're not looking at this like this says anything that we're getting in return, except for people who just like the sport and are fans of the sport and are from
yeah,
those countries. So overall, though, fantastic thing. I think they really did knock it out of the park, and we're going to use a baseball
yeah, for
reference for
sure.
a hockey event. But it was truly an amazing
Absolutely.
event, and I can't wait for the match that will be for us tomorrow at 8 p.m. USA versus Canada.
USA,
Um,
USA.
USA won the first one. I know Canada's going to look for some revenge, and historically speaking, both those countries have had their fair share of battles over the Olympics, and obviously the Hockey World Cup. So this is going to be a fun one, North American battle, hardcore battle, and let's hope that our American boys or North American boys or USA boys come out on top on this one.
Yeah, for sure.
What do we got else going on the list here? Anything fun cooking on the agenda? Oh, yes, we do. Or don't, depending on what you thought about this All-Star break that we just had. It was, in my opinion at least, a bit of a disaster. Interesting, but a disaster. And it just goes to show you that the NBA is heading in a different direction than NHL is, for instance. I think the NHL has a very promising future over the next 10 years versus the NBA. They really need to do some soul searching here and figure out how they're going to be able to grasp some of their viewers, because what they just did for this year's All-Star break did not sit well with a lot of fans. And I know that you didn't really watch too much of it, but basically here's a gist of what happened for the games itself. They did it where they broke it up into four teams. You had the global stars, the young stars, and the OGs. And then they gave the rising stars from Friday night, whoever won that tournament bracket of the rising stars will be the fourth team to play off in this four-seeded matchup between the global stars, the young stars, and the OGs, which all consist of the NBA All-Stars and then the rising stars, right? So then the brackets will face off, and then whoever faces off in the finals win. The OGs won. Steph Curry won his second MVP, but it was a game to 40. So whoever gets the
Yeah.
40 first wins. What I
Hmm.
appreciated the most out of it was obviously being a game to 40, the players are playing a little bit more defense, which I thought was something that was lacking throughout the whole entire All-Star break over the last All-Star games over the last, let's say, 10 years, right? Where we only saw defense really in the second half of the fourth quarter when things were starting to get tightened up. Other than that, though, it just didn't seem like something that should be considered All-Star. Maybe it could have been like an event that was done, but this should not have been the All-Star game. I mean, it was not an actual basketball game where there's a clock and there's a shot clock, but there was no clock because it's a game to 40. And bringing in the rising stars was kind of a disaster. And I mean, these people shouldn't be playing on the same stage as some of these. Like, how do you put the rising stars and Amen Thompson as the best player on that team, and Jaime Jaquez and Dalton Connect, and play LeBron, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry? Like, what are we talking about here? This is not what people want to see, And so even if an upset were to have happened, which we all know probably wasn't going to happen, it's just not the things that should be happening in NBA All-Star break. And it's overall just, the NBA is heading in a wrong direction when it comes to how they're constructing these All-Star breaks. And I know that you didn't watch, but I'm certain you did a little bit of research, and I want to hear what you think. And this was one of those things where it just wasn't a lot of fun to be involved in.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot of interest on my end to even tune in. And Shea Gilgeous-Alexander makes every game all-star game to an extent for the Thunder, but when it comes down to it, it was so confusing to try and figure out what exactly what I was going to be committing these hours to. And not that I'm exactly scheduling out my nights of what I'm going to watch, but in reality, I was watching Prison Break with Carrie when that was going on. I wasn't really looking. I wasn't really even interested to check on who was winning, to check on the scores, anything like that.
What
I
season and
I just
episode are you on?
We're on season 1, episode 12,
So
I
you guys have
want
a
to say.
long way to go. I'm like in middle of season 4 right now. So have fun. That's a great
Oh yeah,
show. And honestly, I
great
think you
show,
did. I think you did right. I think you did right by watching some Prison Break instead of this All Star break,
great show.
All Star game, a weekend, whatever you want to call it. Um,
All right, give me a little Wentworth.
just a little Wentworth.
Yeah, isn't that the guy's real name?
Which guy's real name?
Uh, I forget everyone's real names. Fish.
Wentworth. I don't know.
I'm pretty confident his real name's
It's
Wentworth.
been it's I stopped watching. I'm in season 4, but I stopped about 2 months ago to pick up on some other shows. I do have to get back into it, and so forgive me. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is Wentworth, and it doesn't sound right to me. So I would have
Ben,
thought
have
if
you
you
seen
said
it?
it. Have you seen Prison Break, Ben? No.
I have never seen it. No,
Well,
I heard good things about it,
it's a great show. But
and I
shouldn't
just started a show with a prison guard. He started a show here, so I think that'll be kind of cool.
a prison
That's cool.
guard. What do you mean?
Like he's like a guard at a prison. Oh, is this
Like
not
he,
like he guards the inmates at the
Is this a show?
No.
What is this?
No,
You're
he's-
talking about somebody who came in here?
Yeah,
and-
he's just a client. He just
Oh.
started. Yeah, he just
Oh.
started. Yeah, he
That's
wants.
CO.
pretty cool.
CO.
Whoa. Yeah, he's a corrections officer.
Yeah,
right?
correction officer.
Right,
yeah,
right, right,
exactly.
right. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of like what Prison Break's around, but they're obviously wanting to break out of prison. That's the goal. So great show, though. It's a little older of a show. I think would have come out in early 2000s or 2008, 2009, something like that, whatever it was. But great show. It's been
As
how
far as
many
I'm
seasons
concerned,
is
it
it?
came out 2025.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many seasons that they've been going up until I think 2018, whatever it was. Anyways, let's get back into what we're doing here. But great show. You didn't miss anything. Recapping was probably the best thing you could have done. I should have done the same thing because it was just a disastrous break. I mean, these NBA players, the only good thing that came out of it was everyone got a week off and are resting and are ready for the second half of the season. That's the only thing that really came out of this. And
Yeah.
the Cavs won the skills challenge. That also is a good thing. So other than that, forget about this whole thing. Everything
I
else
saw
was
that. The
junk.
only thing I saw from that weekend was that Chris Paul was cheating.
Chris Paul. Okay, so what happened was Chris Paul and Wembanyama representing the Spurs for the.
And they still lost?
They disqualified them. Okay, let me tell you what happened. It was actually funny. I'm glad you brought it up because I didn't remember
That's
this
the
at
only
first.
thing I saw.
They were the first ones to go in the skills challenge, and so they came up with this scheme that they thought was a smart idea. So instead of shooting the basketballs, they had to take 3 shots from the 3, each one of them, take a shot from the free throw line, and then make a corner 3-pointer as well, right? And so instead of taking the shots and actually like setting up shooting, they literally would take the basketballs and just fling them at the rim. Or not even like they weren't even hitting the rim. Like they were just like throwing the balls, right?
There was like a big fan that had just barely made it over.
Right. It was just like they were
Video.
just throwing them over and trying to get as quickly as done with it as possible. And so they got a record time, which was great, but they were also the first ones to go, and they set the tone because they disqualified them. All the players going forward were like, all right, now we can't do that, but they got disqualified, so now we just have to do our own thing. And the Cavs ended up winning. Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell ended up taking it, and no surprise, they're very talented, and it was good. But I thought it was actually, I was like, listen, I mean, the truth is, Chris Paul is one of those guys where he lives like outside of the rules a little bit. He kind of does his own thing, and
Yeah.
I could totally see him like taking Wemby to the side and be like, all right, we're gonna do this, and like just like let's go, and like he was like, yeah, let's do it. It's a good idea, good idea. Wemby just being so innocent, not realizing, and then all of a sudden they get disqualified. He's like, oh man. Chris Paul's like, I knew what I was doing. He's like,
Wemby probably that was Chris Paul's moment. I feel like Wemby.
we're talking
couldn't
about
have really
Chris Paul,
cared less.
former president of the Players Union or vice president of the Players Union. You're telling me he doesn't know what the rules are for something? Come on.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean that like
No,
he's
I know
not
it's
an
not what you mean. I'm just saying it's like this guy did this. You think he didn't know what he was doing? Chris Paul, 39-year-old veteran point guard.
Oh, he
He
knew what
knew.
he was doing.
He knew what he was doing. He wanted to tell the world basically like we think this is all sham and yeah, we're gonna throw this thing because who actually cares about the skills challenge? I mean, the worst part about the three things that happened, but in my opinion, it's the second worst now because the NBA has decided to turn the dunk contest into a G League dunk contest. It really makes no sense to me why we think that this is just what people want to see. Yeah, Mac McClung could dunk, but he's not worthy of being in the NBA for a reason. He's just not skilled enough. And so we call him every single year,
He's an
say, hey,
athlete.
come, do the dunk contest. Well, I promise you there's people on this planet who can do better dunks than Mac McClung, who are just not in the G League, but they're talented, they can do this thing, and it would be great, but there's a reason they're not around because that's all they could do. They're not basketball players. Mac
He has to have
McClung,
made like he has to have made at least like $1 million in the contracts the last couple of years just to get the call out.
well, they're saying that the total he got for 3 years is actually closer to like $330,000 for all three of them
I'd
total.
still take it.
Of course, I mean it's more than what he's made overall in his basketball career, so it works out for him. I mean, he's like, "Hey, you want to pay me 110 grand a year to do this?" Sure. And guess what? Now he's in the record books in the NBA as a 3-time dunk champion. What? Why do we constantly want to ruin the sport? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, this shouldn't be happening. Mac McClung is a high flyer. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's fun to see him individually dunk a basketball. Do not get me wrong. But when we're talking about a dunk contest, we're talking about 20 years ago, Michael Jordan was doing a dunk contest. Now we have Mac McClung doing a dunk contest. Makes no sense.
I think just as that went out though, I didn't know that happened, but that makes sense in terms of the scheme of things. But I know Ja tweeted something about that something made him want to go back into the dunk contest. And
Yeah.
Giannis says, if you do it, I'll do it.
Yep.
So then I don't know if that's just them trying to save this, albeit they've kind of taken the fun out of it. Still this this historic event, trying to save it.
Well, I mean, they got to do something back, and I mean, it's kind of similar to when United States lost in 2022 to the FIBA World Cup. Well, they didn't even lose; they came in fourth place. They didn't even medal in the 2022 FIBA, and then LeBron sends out that text to Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and says, "Let's go. We're taking this for 2024 Olympics." It's kind of like that, right? But the thing is, has the damage already been done? The truth is, the legacy of what the NBA dunk contest is tarnished because for a 3-year span, you had somebody who was not in the NBA play in this dunk contest, and now 3 years later, after he's a 3-time champion, you have to get Ja Morant and Giannis texting each other to figure out if they want to join in 2026. I mean, listen, great, but there's also plenty of other guys, and I'm not even saying we need superstars, but let's get some relevant NBA players. Like, are you telling me that nobody wants to do it? Like, nobody wants to do the dunk contest? Why? I don't understand why nobody would want to do the dunk contest. Why would someone want to do the dunk contest over the three-point
because
contest?
they make so. It's because they make so much money that it doesn't matter if you give them a $2 million prize. Like they'd rather just go on vacation for that week.
Well, I would understand that argument if you told me that, and we didn't have a 3-point contest where you have, the best players in the 3-point contest shooting threes, right? We have Damian Lillard, and we have Darius Garland, Tyler Hero, some of these really good players, but then we have the dunk contest where they're not relevant players. So I would understand that.
Say the injury probability isn't high in a dunk contest.
No.
In a 3-point contest, it's 0.
I mean,
there's got to be some logic.
Is it zero? Is it zero though? Could they pull a hamstring taking up a 3 when they weren't, projecting to warm out? Who knows, right? I mean, of course you could get. Have we ever seen an injury from a dunk in a dunk contest? I don't recall. I mean, these guys are doing some crazy things in dunk contests, right? They are putting their bodies on the line. But the truth is, I mean, it's a small thing, but this goes so much longer than just like this one night, right? We're restoring a portion of basketball that people used to love to watch. I mean, we saw Nate Robinson do it, right? 5'7" Nate Robinson flying around multiple dunk champions. And then we also see Superman Dwight Howard also doing it years ago. Like, these were the fun times of the dunk contest. Blake Griffin did. He jumped over a car, albeit it was the front of a car and it was a sedan, but it was interesting and it was a relevant NBA player. We're talking about a superstar. And, Donovan Mitchell, he did it in 2017 as well. Where are these guys? Like, I'm not asking like the people who have done it in the past to say I have to do it again, but like, you're telling me you can't get a group of solid players? Not even like I'm not even asking for like an all-star. I'm asking for somebody that's actually in the NBA.
I thought of a kind of cool thing that you can utilize these contests to maybe, because when you're watching the playoffs and sometimes the more casual fan might not know some guy who has his career game with 15 points, 18 points in the playoffs. Everyone's like, who's this guy? Maybe it gives them a little brand if you get role players on expected playoff teams to try and build their brand up a little bit, so that when that comes around, then there's more people that are recognizable, more people that are associated with the team, and then you also have it that these guys are getting rewarded for doing it by whatever the prize is. They get the notoriety and they get potentially their name etched in history, which can still be saved.
Technically, Mac McClung's in the Orlando Magic system. If you wanted an Orlando Magic representing the dunk contest, you couldn't have. I'm not saying that, your logic is wrong, but I'm saying, like, couldn't they have picked somebody else on that roster instead of Mac McClung? Like, what about, let's say, I don't know, Franz Wagner? He could dunk. He could dunk pretty nicely too. Paolo, he could dunk.
But in my theory, Mac McClung wouldn't even be an option. That's why it's not really able to be compared, because you have to be a player who's playing where the goal of it is to learn what these guys who maybe stand in the corner and shoot threes or just play defense all game, that maybe they have a little swag to them.
Well, here's also where it stems from too. It's not only just the dunk contest where we're referring to G Leaguers. The Rising Stars, which they also broke up into the 4 teams and did a tournament similar to the All-Star game, and they picked 3 groups from the Rising Stars, first and second year players, and then the 4th team was the G League team. So now we're also bringing the G Leaguers into the All-Star break and saying they should be a part of this, where it just shows that, I think, if anything, it's a lack of creativity on the NBA side. Like, they think that this is an acceptable thing. They settle for the first thought almost, and they say, oh, we've came up with this idea. Let's put this out there. And it's almost like taking, glue and throwing it against the wall, or taking something and throwing it against the wall, seeing if it sticks. And it's just like G Leaguers shouldn't be in this week of All-Star break. We want to see the best of the best, not the guys who are in the minor league division.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, if the G Leaguers could dunk so well, have their own contest, and it'll build its own brand. I think that they're trying too hard to justify the existence of a G League, when in reality it should just be to develop players, or to have basketball in cities that don't really have sports to get behind, where it's a cool thing to bring to certain areas that might not have that. I mean, some of them are in areas like, I know when we went to OKC that they played across the street, so that wouldn't be the best example, but there are some of them that are in areas that there are people that could go there just like a minor league baseball team, watch the guys, and then maybe when some of the guys grow, they go to the big game to see them, and it's really cool. It's a really cool dynamic, but I feel like they're trying too hard to justify the G League sponsorship to keep that Gatorade G on it, and they're just making it pop up everywhere. And I think that the fact of it is that the G League needs to be the G League. The NBA can't be in competition with people who would all drop their G League jersey in a second if any NBA team called. I mean, the G League, it's great for people who want to stay in the game, or great for people who love the game and are good enough but are just not good enough to take that next step. But leave it as that. They don't need this recognition. They don't need to be on the global landscape, because if people were that interested, they would be watching it.
I think you made up a really good point where, when the former D League became the G League, it kind of brought that branding sponsorship of Gatorade, and you're making the statement that the NBA is trying to appease, their sponsorship by putting them on the spotlight here. Could be a very good case. I mean, I didn't think about it like that, but I could see that very well being something that they're trying to push this agenda, even though everyone knows what Gatorade is. I don't think it makes a difference if this is going to be the way that you want to put it out there. I mean, truthfully speaking, right? Like you said, these guys are it's a minor leagues, right? These are
Yeah.
the second tier level, like between the collegiate and the professional level. This is what you have. The MLB has the minors, the NBA has the G League, NFL has, let's say, the practice squad teams where they scrimmage each other
Yeah.
and whatever it is. And these are
Hockey's at
like
the AHL too.
right, exactly. And so you have these levels here for the development side on these players. These players that almost there, but just not good enough. Truthfully speaking, though, 95% of the players that who do end up coming out and are able to make it into that next level, and I'm saying the 95% of the percentage of players that are able to play, because we
Yeah.
know that's a very
No, I
small
got you.
percentage. They're not like long-term players. They might play a couple of years in the league, 2 to 3 years, might have had a good half a season stretch where they earned themselves a guaranteed contract. That's really it, right?
There
Very
might be
rarely.
one Jeremy Lin a decade at most.
Right. Very rarely you're going to find that diamond in the rough where you pull somebody out from the G League, they come into the NBA now, and they're all of a sudden one of your better players. They're a role player. They're maybe even a borderline all-star. You're not getting that out of these guys. I mean, if you do, great. You see these guys putting up 20, 25 a game in the G League, but that's because they're playing against competition that are similar to them, right? They look good over there, and you bring them up. I could even tell you, right? Amani Bates, for instance, Cavaliers drafted him second round last season. He puts up 22 a game, 6-6 in the G League for Kenton Charge. Looks like, oh my God, like why wouldn't you want to call him up? Even if he puts up 10, 11 off your bench, that's still pretty good. But that's such a big differential that he's not going to just get 15 to 20 minutes a game in the NBA and all of a sudden now give you, 8 to 10 points per game. It's just not going to happen, right? And so
It doesn't correlate directly. I know what you're saying.
exactly. So, I mean, unless they're one of those guys and they're just like nitty gritty putting the work in and just like are able to get better, right? Because they're really, in my opinion, the people who are in those minor leagues, right? They're not necessarily improving their game, they're improving their craft, which are two different things, right? Their game is already peaked out probably by their collegiate level. And so now they're trying to hone in on being a better overall, smarter, higher intelligent player, right? And just whatever sport that they're playing. And so in the NBA specifically speaking, that becomes a lot more difficult. I mean, the progression changes. Either you have it or you don't have it. And even if you put the hard work in, you might get a few years in the league, but you're never going to be that guy that sticks. I mean, the talent level in the NBA is far different than some of these other sports are, and it's a big differential. But
I'd even rather see them play some EuroLeague teams than the G League. Those guys are at least playing against.
I would
Like,
love
there are
that.
people who
I think
that would be-
everybody would love that because I think everyone understands that the competition level overseas is way more superior than it once was. And that's another conversation that I do want to get into, but not right now when it comes to the international level of play, specifically for basketball and compare it to what's happening in the NBA. But we have a lot of basketball, and I mean, we can go on about it. The second half of the season is now officially kicking off, and we're excited. Both of our teams are 44-10, sitting in the top of their conferences, and we're hoping for a smooth setting sail into the playoffs. And, April can't come any sooner. We'll bring you guys more regarding the playoffs. But we have a fan question from our none other than Monorail Matt. Ben,
Matt.
could you do us the phenomenal honors of reading off his question, and we'll get that going for him?
I would be more than happy to do the honor of reading the fan. I know you guys like to see my face, so I'm gonna come in there.
There we
Hello,
go.
hey, what's up, Matt?
Heyo.
Representing them Florida Panthers, too.
Oh yeah, yeah. We just had a show before this, and yeah. So the question for you guys from Matt, our good old friend Matt. He says, "Loving the new segment, guys. What do you guys think the top 5 hardest sports positions are?"
Phenomenal question. Josh, I'll designate you to start this off. But thank you again also, Matt, for loving
As
our new
always.
segment. We have another one coming after your question, too, so stick around for that as well. But Josh, kick it off. What are the top 5 toughest positions? Great question, Matt.
Yeah, for sure. Just to put a bow on the other thing, I think we should do a segment another time where we kind of tie in the sponsorships and everything into you tie the sponsorship and you tie could the G League be in competing with the NCAA be why they're pushing that. But we'll do that another time. I think that that's just something to put a pin in and and maybe just dive a little deeper into, and maybe we'll try and find someone who has a little more experience with that. But so I'll go. I know Harry always likes going last to first, so I'll go last to first. First I'll start. I have a couple honorable mentions because they kind of go along with my top five hardest positions. I think that the offensive line in football is an honorable mention because every position has its own challenges, but they do all have each other, which is why I think that it wouldn't make the list. But I do think that their job is very respectable and they work very hard. And also, just hitting a baseball in general, I think, is the hardest thing to do in sports. But obviously, every position does it, and every position has their own things. So those are my honorable mentions. But number five for me is the relief pitcher in baseball. I think that the pressure of needing to flip a switch in any moment, whether you've been sitting around joking with your teammates, or, I mean, I guess you shouldn't be joking around with your teammates if you know that there's a chance you could come in, but you need to be able to turn it on, be on your A game every single time, and execute. Sometimes on the biggest stages, sometimes with the World Series, with the championship series, with the division series, with a game that gets your team in the playoffs or not on the line. So I think that strictly around pressure, that's my number five. Number four, I got the quarterback in football. I think that leading an NFL offense is an extremely tough task, and I think it'll be number one without two things: without people getting millions of dollars to teach you and help you craft that. Which I know everyone has coaches, but I think that having a specific offensive coordinator is trying to make your life easier, specifically on that, and help you read the defenses. Whereas I think other coaches have different responsibilities, but quarterback still makes the list. And then sticking in football with number three, I got the cornerback because the way that the rules are right now, I think that you look at, not only do they have to mimic the move of the guy in front of them, whether it's a speedster, whether it's a physical guy, whether it's a slot receiver, whether it's a tight end, even. These cornerbacks sometimes are lined up and they gotta go stride for stride. And now with the rules, they could barely even touch them to keep them close. I mean, I know that within the first 5 yards you give them a little bump, but these are some of the most elite athletes in the world, so it's a really tough job, and the really good ones are really great players. Number two, I have the goalie in hockey. You have to be able to react to consistently 70, 80, 90, 100 mile an hour pucks from varying distances and depths, and consistently there are people who make their living staying in front of the goalie, deflecting the puck. So just as you see it one way, it gets flicked through your legs or over your shoulder, and then you can't stop it. Or some of them react so well that they can. But and the element of the shootout and the penalty shot is what put them on the list over the soccer goalie, because while they have a penalty shot, but it's a little different. But I guess that's another honorable mention that I should have put, because I was thinking about putting them on the list, but I think the hockey goalie has it really hard, because the screeners can just, there's no other sport that someone's allowed to stand in front of someone that's trying to do their job and the puck can just whiz by them and them not even see it and then them allow a goal. I think that that's really hard, and the great ones do a great job. And then the number one is the catcher in baseball. You have to call the game, you have to react to every pitch, you have to throw runners out, and you have to do the single hardest thing in sports, which is hit at an elite level. I mean, obviously, catchers are not held to the expectation of 900 OPS and all these gaudy numbers that a lot of the MVPs win, but nine times out of 10, if you go in a clubhouse of a good team, they'll say that they're in house, that their catcher is their MVP for all the work they put in.
I mean, pretty spot on. For me, it's very tough to list them in order, right? Because every sport is respective in what they do and the craft
Yeah,
that they
for
do.
sure.
So it's really tough to compare, the let's say the toughest position in football versus the toughest position in the MLB. It's just very tough. So I have a list. I actually have six because I wanted to consider like an honorable mention, but I just don't have like a 5-1 and then an honorable mention. But
Yeah, that's
essentially
fair.
all the positions that you said are on my list too. The quarterback, the pitcher. I actually have the starting pitcher over the relief pitcher, but I put pitcher in general. The reason why I like to emphasize the starter itself is because specifically the ace of a rotation, because the amount of pressure that specific pitcher has to make sure that they're coming out of a win. They're not pitching for 5 days in a row. They're relied upon on them coming out and locking in a win for 6-7 innings, letting up no runs potentially, and just getting a quality start. And so that's why I think
for the whole week. I feel you.
I think it's really one of those things where, especially, why the starting pitcher, especially an ace, gets paid as much as they do, is because they are relied on as much as they are relied on to at least keep order in their rotation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, relievers, just like you said, you put on a switch, it becomes very difficult for them to just all of a sudden now get into this ready, set, go moment, especially if they pitch the day before, 2 days in a row, and this could be their third day pitching in a row. Luckily for most competitive teams, their bullpens have multiple strengths in them, where if they bring in a reliever and it's just not working, his pitch count gets there, he's let up a couple of walks, only one out, they can go and get another reliever. And guess what? If that pitcher now has an advantage over that hitter, and let's say he throws that specific pitch like a sinker, boom, sinker down and in on a righty, and he hits into a double play, you get out of the inning in one pitch, right? And so that's why baseball, I think, is such a beautiful sport. And immediately, just like that, you can be in a situation where it's a high leverage stress. Pitcher comes in, throws one pitch, double play, you're out of the inning, and it's like, holy crap, how did that just happen? Like, he just beat him. And it's a mental sport, it's a physical sport, it's all the above, and that's why I love baseball. But getting down to the list, NHL goalie, I mean, these guys, the reaction time it takes, not only for the NHL goalie, but I also do have the soccer goalie as well. I mean, just like you said, for the NHL side, for it to be like someone is literally sitting in front of you and you don't know where that puck could be in that very moment. Now, the pro of that is that obviously you're taking up most of the net size, right? If you're with those pads on, you're a big goalie, you're taking up mostly every sliver. Doesn't necessarily mean the puck's not going to get by you. Goals are getting scored left and right in the NHL. But in soccer, that would be considered an offside. The difference here is that a soccer player needs to track from such an early position, because depending on where that players are coming from, they have such an open net behind them, right? So they need to get out front. They need to take a step out front. I mean, hockey players, they do this too, obviously, to get a feel. But we're talking about, well, sometimes we see the goalies that are halfway to midfield, and you're like, holy shit. And then they have to trace themselves back, kind of track the guy, follow him, because one wrong move and that ball goes over your head. It's a goal, right? You have such a big, you're one little thing, and you have this big ass, excuse my French, but you have the big goalie goalpost in front of you, behind you, That's why whenever I see like replays of these goalies who make these dives and they block the ball, I'm like, wow, like that is like such a difficult thing to be able to do. The reaction time for goalies in general is just, it's spot on. You can't really beat it. I mean, we talk about baseball being such a reactive sport, but there's so many other positions in all throughout the sports that need to be super reactive, just as reactive, so that they're able to play at a high caliber level. Cornerback, of course. I mean, just like you said, they have to mimic the opposing side and essentially copycat them without even knowing what they're going to do, which is like, how the hell are you supposed to do that? But I think cornerbacks are arguably, if not the most athletic position in all of sports. Yeah. Because that specific cornerback, especially if you're like a top 5 cornerback in the NFL, the level of athleticism you have is second to none. I mean, we're talking about Sauce Gardner and all these great cornerbacks and secondary players that
like Pat
Surtain, who just won Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, we're talking about some of these incredible athletes, and it's forget about the position; it's the athletic side on things. And in an NFL world where we're seeing flags getting called left and right for just touching somebody, right? So they're getting penalized more often than not now, and they still have to play at such a high level. How can you dispute it? And the catcher. I mean, like, these players have to control basically the whole game, right? Yeah. And they're not like a pitcher where they're only out there for one day. They're there 4 out of 5 games a week, let's say, on a cycle, a 5-game cycle. They're there 4 out of 5 games. And they have to control, they have to see everything. They have to see the lead runner at first base. Is he dipping? Is he looking to take an extra step? Signaling needs to know every single pitcher's what they throw, signal it for them. If a pitcher throws 4 pitches and now the reliever comes in and he throws 3 different pitches, he needs to know that, right? And of course they have like their wristbands and everything like that, but to always constantly, they're not always looking at that thing. Could they? Sure, but that's just not what happens. For them to memorize this, put the signals down, call the pitches, I mean, we're talking about some difficult things here. And on top of that, that's not all they do. They have to also be a hitter. They have to also contribute offensively. There was a period of time where we saw probably from like 2015 to 2020 where catchers were not really offensive contributors, right? You were just looking
Yeah.
for that defensive guy, and that was enough. That was enough because a high quality defensive catcher is worth more than just your average bat, right? And
Yeah.
that's why, I want to bring this up too. It goes to show you that sometimes you worry as a Yankee fan, right, where their heads are at when they make these trades. I mean, Fernando Cruz is a very solid, opportunity to turn him into a really good relief pitcher, but we gave up one of the best defensive catchers in our sport right now, in Jose Trevino, right? We're talking about a platinum glove winner here. And maybe he doesn't have the best arm strength behind the plate. He'll pick you off here and there, but he's like the floor general for the point guard of the NBA. He's like the field general, which is the quarterback of football. And I didn't even talk about the quarterback because we all know how difficult it is to be the quarterback. From start to finish, you need to make sure that the offense is being the offense that it needs to be, and that's why you get paid the big bucks as the quarterback. But as the catcher, and also, unfortunately for catchers, their careers end up shorter than most other players in the MLB because of how straining it is on their body to be crouched for 3 to 3.5 hours potentially in a ball game. And right, so going back to the trade of Trevino, I'm like, why get rid of him? And now, we have Austin Wells, who's progressed well defensively, and that's another thing, but I don't want to get into that conversation. It just goes to show you that the catcher position is truly arguably the most difficult position to play in all of sports.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, to sit back there and have a ball come at you every 15 seconds at 100 miles an hour, or 95 to 100 miles an hour. And if it's not a 95 to 100, you think that's the hard part? Oh, no. The 77 mile an hour knuckleball, that's the one you got to worry about. Or the 79 mile an hour curveball, that's the one you got to worry about. The 100 mile an hour fastball, that's nothing. The 79 mile an hour breaking pitch, whew. And can you imagine the catcher needs to predict where that ball is going to land? And needs to place himself perfectly to make sure the ball doesn't get past him so the runner doesn't advance and whatever it is. I mean, great question, Matt. I love talking about this type of thing because truly, you can't, it's tough to put a list, right? You could put a list together, but it's really tough because baseball is baseball, football is football, basketball is basketball, hockey is hockey, and soccer is soccer. They're all respectable in their own rights, and what they're doing in their own sports are extremely difficult things. The sports in general are extremely difficult things, and the hardest positions are taking their portion out of the difficulty and placing it on their shoulders and putting it out there. So great question again. I think if I had to pick though, if I had to just give you my number one toughest position to play in all of sports, catcher.
Yeah.
It's just hard. It's just hard.
100%.
Like, it's easy for someone to want to say the quarterback because they're, football is a bigger, more popular sport, but it's just not. It's just not. Throwing a football is easier than what a catcher does, fundamentally speaking. And so because of that, I think catcher is more difficult. Like, I could throw a football in spiral and throw it 20 yards down the field. I'm not a quarterback. I'm not a football player, and I never will be, but I can do that, right? Could I sit there behind the plate with my glove on and catch Garrett Cole's off-speed pitches or even his fastball? No, absolutely not. My hand will break. I will leave crying, literally. It's just the way it is. You might not want to admit that, and you probably might catch the ball, but it's still very difficult to do it.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure.
It's very difficult to do. If Tim Wakefield, rest in peace, Tim Wakefield, if he threw a knuckleballer, I don't think anybody's catching that who doesn't have catcher's experience in baseball. But last thing, thank you again, Matt. 60 seconds. We're going to give you guys our same thing this time. I'm going to run them all for Josh. He's going to give us his one-word answers to these, and let's see how they go. So let's put us side by side, and we can do this whenever Ben gives us the green light. We'll start this.
I was gonna say I think it might look better going back and forth.
Okay, you're right. Actually, that is right. That's how we did it last time.
Yeah. So
okay, let's do that.
You just run it. Green light.
All right, Josh. Michaela Bridges drops 55 against Auburn.
I don't know who that is.
Charlie McAvoy to miss 4 Nations championship.
Tough.
Stanton not swinging a bat for the last 4 weeks.
Can I say we don't need him until October?
Travis Hunter wanting to play both sides of the field.
No.
MLB will test automated strike zones in spring training, eyeing full-time in 2026.
Delaying.
Okay. Real Madrid beats Man City 3-1. That happened about an hour before we started recording.
Dominance.
Sam Darnold, and this is the last one, Sam Darnold's future with the Vikings.
Over.
There you go. Love it. That was great. What a great episode. I think we got into a lot of details regarding some really
Was
good
the first
things
one
here.
a women's player?
It is, yeah. Michaela Blakes, she dropped 55 points against Auburn. If you
Oh,
ask me
said
what team she
Bridges. I
plays
still
for.
didn't know who it was either way.
I said Bridges?
Yeah, but congratulations to her. I'm a big advocate of
Michaela, if you're
women's.
somehow watching this, I am duly so sorry for
I'm
getting
sorry
your name wrong.
too.
You are
For-
an incredible basketball player. I did see you drop 55 there.
You could 21 me. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, well, thank you guys again for tuning into a wonderful episode. We really appreciate you guys. And of course, we want to hear the craziness. So if we're crazy, say, Harry, how could you say, or Josh, how could you say the catcher is the toughest position? It is obviously the designated hitter and just no questions asked. I'd be like, okay, well, I don't know if I'm the crazy one here, but please let us know. Let us know how crazy we are. Josh, where can they find us?
You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. And make sure to tell a friend about your favorite podcast. And we will be having one of you on here very soon.
Let's not forget the best part of our show, our revamped version this week. Our yogiism will be turned into a Benism.
Dun, dun, dun.
5 minutes before the show, Ben rolled off he's not a nobody. That was a good one, Ben. He's not a nobody. Ben, keep them rolling. We need these more often because yogis, we're starting to run out of yogis. So if you can come up with some Benisms,
Unfortunately, we won't get any more of them.
we'll put them out there. Thank you guys for tuning into another episode of Beyond the Score podcast. We will see you guys again next week, and stay tuned for our social media where we will be posting some new content coming up.